Hello, hello, hello. Nice to see you here, 4 viewers. We're doing a new thing now. Oh boy. What could it be? What could it turn into? What new joyous things will come to us today? Okay. Here's the deal. Amazing. Beautiful. Scared you all off. Alright. Here's the deal. I'm gonna get a drink and I'm gonna come back because despite starting on time, I forget to get the drink, you know? Can't do streaming without making mistakes. Come on. Good morning. Good morning. I've got an exciting one today. Welcome to Live High in Creation. Or Live High in Creation if you prefer. Or I guess you would be wrong in that case because it is Live High. But you can have your preferences. I don't mind. In this show, I'm going to go through some parts of my artworks. And in fact, this week, and maybe next week, we'll do another one of these, depending on how it works. But I'm winging it today. And I'm going to talk about an artwork called Refocus that I've been ongoing making since, whether you can class it as making, maybe performing, I don't know. Making since 2014 or so. I don't know when I first did it. Essentially, my principles, the things that I've, the list of phrases that I chose for myself to follow. Now, I don't always follow these, but I do return to them quite a bit, maybe once every couple of days. Reread them, try to work out whether I still align with them, and then if I don't, I try to push towards it. And I haven't looked over them in a couple of days, I guess. But we'll go through each of them, each of the current list, because the list does change over time. And I'm going to describe them all. So this should be fun. I've got my Posca pen here, black 24 apparently, and I've got my nice little overhead cam with my squash and a piece of paper and my current list. I'm going to go through them. For a bit of background, I know that I know my camera is wobbly. I kind of like it, that it is a bit wobbly. But I might change it at some point. It doesn't really matter right now. What Refocus is the sequel project to a project that I started before that, called Focus, which was going to be the principles that I led the rest of my life by. It was a collection of 12. First 7, stay fixed. Solve, don't develop problems. Everything has its place. Caffeine before noon only. Cash unless forced away. Removing's hard, don't get. Maintaining those deserving relationships. Promise only if fulfillable. Eat plain, healthy food. Finish what you start. Cultivate a daily practice. And keep it simple, stupid. And that list, I think, stood for a few years. But some of them, caffeine, plain, healthy food, first 7, stay fixed, became really hard to achieve all the time. Now, they all have background in the meaning and why I chose those words, and they're all 4 words long, so it took me a lot of thought to get it down to like that, man. But I'm not going to go through them. I'm not going to go through the original list, because I think by now it's kind of pointless. But I'm going to go through the current list. So, Refocus as of 2020, 10, 17. We have Rule 0. Write your own rules. Now, I think this one is probably one of the more obvious ones. And this used to be first 7, stay fixed, but I realized after a while that it's kind of, whenever I'd like share this list with people, maybe like half of them would be like, can I have a copy of it? Oh, that's really cool. And things like this, like, has it worked for you? Do you still stick to it? And I quickly realized that actually there was more that I could change with the list, more I could improve it, and that really the list was just going to be for me, and that I wasn't entirely sure that it would be the list that would do well to survive in or like over the course of the 40-year plan. So it couldn't be like the founding principles of the the commune. So it's not like cash unless forced away wouldn't exactly work in that sort of way. And caffeine before noon only is like such a specific rule that it just wouldn't stick. So I decided actually we need to have a set of rules that can be reevaluated constantly. Take it more like a scientific sort of approach and like work out whether actually these rules are useful, whether they're needing to be updated, whether like a rule doesn't work or anything. This is Draw My Life. We can actually take something from. Yeah, you could. It's a very abstracted version of Draw My Life. So, write your own rules. Essentially, this is just my list. It's kind of important, I think, to draw rules from other places and then make them apply to yours. Like sometimes you'll find a rule that like is like perfect, that will fit into the things that you require and the principles that you believe, and like it'll just fit. Like there are a couple on the current list that are like that for me, and you'll find that even with 12 rules, like you end up getting some redundancy, and you only realize that like a year into having them, as like the distinction between the two they don't anymore like fit. It doesn't quite fit as much as it used to. You don't need both of them, and there's definitely two at the minute that I'm not entirely sure what to do with, and I have like a potential replacement. Anyway, so write your own rules. You can take things from other places, and you can reappropriate them or like adjust them to fit to where you are. Like, I don't know. I guess I'll point it out as we're going on, but yeah. You don't need to keep the rules forever. That's like an important thing to me. Like sometimes you'll just find a rule won't work, so just don't worry about it. It's your rules. You can do what you want. Okay. Rule first. Solve. Don't develop problems. Solve, don't develop problems is one of those rules that I definitely still struggle with, but it is something that I strive towards. I think it's important to take note and check in on something that you're doing a lot, quite a bit, to make sure that you're actually like using that action to actually push forwards and solve things, not just make more problems for yourself later. And I think this is like one of those. It's a pretty obvious one, I think anyway. But it is something that I have to keep reminding myself of. You always want to solve things while they're small things rather than big things. And sometimes maybe it's easier to solve a lot of things at once, like, I don't know, like going through emails or something. You don't want to be checking them every 10 minutes, or you don't really want to be like sending, like constantly replying to messages, or just constantly eating like a bowl of pasta or something. Like to solve hunger, you don't just continuously eat, right? You wait for meals and you do it in bulk. And I think it's the same with a lot of problems that you need to solve. Like sometimes it's just better to do it in batches. Do you get scared then paralyzed with problems? If you do, how are you unstuck? Usually I push myself really hard to I go, like, if I feel the need to procrastinate on like a certain activity, like if I find myself like a great example of this is when I about maybe like every year or so, I'll like get obsessed with a game, or it's like most of the time it's Minecraft, but sometimes it'll be like something else, and like I'll find myself wanting to play it, and then I'll be like, okay, no, I can't keep doing this, so I just play it too much. I just lean into it as hard as I can, and then I get completely sick of it, and have to leave and do something else. Like, and usually I just do the activities that are there. So I push too hard until it breaks. Sometimes problems get too big. Like, for instance, right now I have this sailing boat that I really haven't taken care of, called Selena. And Selena is currently very, very wet, full of water probably, and I know that I can't dedicate the time to fix it right now. I mean, I could, but it would take a lot. Like, it would put so many other things out of place, and it is quite a paralyzing problem to have. But I know that it's not going to get too much worse from here, so I just try to like put it out of my mind and try to return to it at a later date when I can actually put time to it and get it done. Because otherwise, it'll just be like piecemeal, and I won't actually like get anywhere with it. I don't think. Like, it'll be more of a detriment to try to solve this problem right now. Things that are like low, like that are still problems but paralyzing, and I can't really wait for them. I guess I don't really have that many of those anymore. Usually when I have a task that starts to like build with anxiety about it, and I don't really procrastinate too much, but when I do procrastinate, like, it generally only lasts like a day or two. I mean, I tend to find like just leaning into it, giving yourself a break, or trying to break down the task a bit helps. Because you'll just make yourself ill if you don't actually solve the problems. And this one is definitely one that I struggle with. But because it is partially about procrastination, but then it's also partially about like not making the wrong actions, like looking back, trying to predict what will happen when you do these things, figuring out what the worst result would be and what the best result would be and what would be the most likely result, and then trying to make a judgment from there whether it is something that you should be doing or whether it isn't. And that sometimes can take a lot, especially if it's like a big ask or a big action. Okay, let's move on. Tres. Everything has its place. Oh, it's not an apostrophe, is it? It is place. Yeah. Okay. Whatever. That's how every problem looks for me. It's just fucking anxiety, but still I just leave Earth, don't ask for help, not even procrastination. Yeah. But sometimes tasks just go away. Usually if they're important, they demand your attention enough that it takes on. But then I think I rationalize it a lot of the time as in the end, it's me that's going to be the judge of whether I did well or not. And like I'm in control of the judgment of myself, ultimately. And that if I decide to purposefully let something get like a problem get too bad, then it's my responsibility to feel guilty about it or to not feel guilty about it. And sure, like the guilt will like pop up every now and then again about like letting something fail so badly, but ultimately I'm the judge of that, right? If like I'm trying to think of an example, but it's kind of hard right now anyway. Because most of the things that I've done this with, I think I've just forgotten about after time. I haven't really left things too long for a while, but when I did, it was just I just made the decision at some point, like, okay, I'm just gonna let it play out and see what happens, and whatever the result is, I'll just take it. It's part of the same thing as like fear setting in Stoicism. Like if you don't get this thing done. If you don't get this thing done, what is the worst that's actually going to happen? And like 9 times out of 10, it's not you end up homeless, or it's not like you're going to die. It's just something will get slightly worse for a while, and then once it gets to a breaking point, then it might become a problem, or it might just stop being a problem because other people will have forgotten about it too. Yeah. So number 3, everything has its place. This is the same sort of thing, actually. It sort of blends into each other. Everything has its place is kind of both like an organizational thing. Like you want to put, obviously, like everybody puts like toothbrushes in bathrooms, or like where a sink is, and like you'll have soap next to a sink, and you'll have like food in the kitchen, right? If you're lucky. It like extends beyond that, like making sure that everything that you own has a place, both like your physical objects, but also your emotions and the way that you act. It's sort of related to not tone policing, but I can't think of what it's called. When you like adjust how you speak, the language that you use when you're around different people. Like everyone does this to an extent, but it's the same thing as making sure that everything you own has the right place for it. And if it's something that doesn't fit in any place, then you either need to remove it and give it to its proper place, or stop doing that action. That's the key, I guess. If you can't find a place for it, then there's no point in it being around. Sometimes you have to make a place for it, and sometimes that place changes. But you need to find a place for everything, otherwise it's just going to be messy. Both in the physical space with like, maybe let me have a look around. Like I have like a set of drawers. They're all labeled. They all have different things in them. And broadly, the smaller things in my life go into these drawers. Like I have one that's purely for paper and card. One that's for like tools, tools and glue, things like that. And then another drawer that is purely about power adapters and like sync cables and things like that. And like if something gets reduced so much that I don't actually need that drawer anymore, it'll get repurposed, because the drawer no longer has its place, right? And I guess it's the same sort of thing with like friendship groups and like messages and language that you use in those groups. Like, is this the right place to be talking about this right now? A lot of things go much better if you have those things cleared up. Especially in the settings where it's actually those things, or the actions and the speech are actually like needed to be reconciled with, needed to be like used. Like that, it's important to keep them in order. As well, it helps with finding things, both finding ways of talking to people and also finding physical objects. Okay. That's 21, 22. Okay. So we're at the quarter mark now. 3. Cultivate a daily practice. So I think this is another one that's kind of on the nose, kind of obvious to it, but yeah, like you should be continuously trying to build up something that you're doing regularly that is either honing in a skill or like working towards more happiness, I would say. Whether that's like listening to music, or brushing your teeth, or writing a couple of words of your great novel. You want to do it as often as possible, but regularly is more important than often. It doesn't really matter how much of that thing that you're doing. You just have to make it a practice of doing it. Having that like repeating pattern within your life is a quite powerful thing. Like that's kind of one of the rules that led to me doing this streaming stuff. That like as soon as I get it to being a habit, to like be added into my practice, then I know that I can use it to experiment. I know that I can use it to build on top of. So it's not so much like you're not going to feel so good about being up close and personal with somebody if you haven't brushed your teeth, or there's certain bits of groundwork that seemingly, if you just look at what they are individually, you you don't see as being like the base of things. Like brushing your teeth, that's just like keeping good oral hygiene, but that might relate into so many other different things just from being that one thing. Being, even though it's like quite a simple thing, the runoff effects, like the confidence that you might have, the ability to, I don't know, like eat cold foods, or maybe you have like a fear of the dentist, right? And that'll like, it helps with that too. I mean, those two things are pretty well linked together. But another example would be, I don't know, making daily posts on like Instagram, for instance. Like you get more contacts, as in through like your friend groups get more enriched. People remember you more. People have more of a ability to interact with you. People, you get better at like taking photos or like presenting information and your ideas. You get more proof of you being an actual person online, and more active. People can see you as being more visible there, so have more of an opportunity to reach out to you. And if you're forcing yourself to do it every day, you'll find yourself just trying different things, because you'll run out of things to do quickly unless you're doing something that's super repetitive, like taking pictures of pasta, or I don't know, taking photos of traffic cones. But even then, like, you get kind of bored with it after a while, and if you like stick through the boredom, eventually you find that like you become like really bizarrely creative with it, and it becomes more of a base for other things. Like you find, maybe I can do something else with this big resource, like particularly with my like cola reviews on Instagram. Like I know that at some point, because now I have all of this thought about how many colas and what each of these colas that I've had were like, and I had like a strict sort of reviewing mechanism for it. But it was quite a simple idea. I can then reuse all of that information and knowledge about it to do a bunch of different things. Like I can be like, hey, I've got like a pretty good taste now for colas. I know what makes a good cola to me and what doesn't make a good cola, so I could probably make my own cola at some point, or help make cola. Or I could write a book on all of these different colas that I've tried, if we take it even more basic. Or like just from the packaging alone, like I could make art from all of the different brands of it. Or like you can find lots of things that you can do with something so simple. So like having something that you can keep coming back to, having something that you can expand out from, is like really, really useful, even if it seems like it's something that's pointless at the time, or you see it as being basic. You eventually get to a point where you're like, actually no, this isn't basic anymore, this is like a substantial bit of work. So yeah, writing 3 words in a Word document every day is gonna help get you towards the book eventually. Whether it's the actual book that you're writing then, or just because you're thinking of ideas and you're coming back to it, and you're finding yourself it's getting easier to get into that mood for writing, or just sitting down and doing it, And I think that helps a lot with the procrastination and stuff too. Okay, so that's the first 4. Now on to number 4. Always look for helpers. So I'm actually going to put down 2. No, I'm not. I'm going to just say this one. So this is like a condensed version of a quote from Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers, the American kids show host of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. in which he is quoting his mother, I think, who said that always look for the people who are helping, because you'll always find when something bad happens, you always look for people that are helping, because you'll always be able to find good people trying to work through problems. I think it was in reference to maybe 9/11 or like the one of the assassinations during the 40 years that he was airing. And I would recommend watching Mr. Rogers in general, but specifically that clip of him talking about it. I think there's probably a couple of them, but they're all great. Essentially, yeah, it's sort of being appreciative, knowing who you can actually help, or if you go and see the people who are helping, then you have at least one pattern that you can follow and try to emulate or augment to make better, or just realize that it isn't all bad, that there are people there that are helping. It does help calm quite a bit, because you'll always find helpers, whatever form they're in. And along with that, 5, always be spotting pattern. Always be spotting patterns, which is a tongue-in-cheek rule, kinda. There are a couple in this that are referencing the same thing, but it's fun. Always be spotting patterns is basically like if you can dissolve something down, a process, into a pattern that can be repeated, that can be tested upon, then you get to a point where you can just either go through the motions and do those things and test it out. Like, obviously it won't be the same every time, unless you're like using a computer or like working with something that's in a very controlled environment. But spotting patterns is like really about trying to identify where everything is in its place that isn't under your control, I would say, and like maybe how you navigate through those things. So it sort of relates a little bit to Everything Has Its Place, in that it's about trying to locate those the things that other people do and that other people act within, in order to then make predictions about the future, or know how to go through certain motions. So I think I actually used it when explaining the last rule. That like you can see when people are doing good, and you see what they're doing, and you see that there's this pattern of behavior that you can emulate, or you can add to, or take down if it's not helpers. You study, find out what the pattern is, and then figure out what to do about it. Because often you'll find that there isn't much that you can do, but sometimes it's good to just know what the pattern is, at least. It might come in handy later. Okay, and this is 6, which I think sort of relates a bit too heavily to 4 at the minute, which is always be giving credit. Let me just check that I'm not going through this page. No, I'm not. Okay, good. Because I think I'm going to run out of space at some point, so always be given credit is kind of making sure that you tell everybody that you love them if you love them, and making sure to be thankful and being grateful about the things and people in your life that are like really good to you. Like even if that's like, yeah, like saying thank you to somebody that like delivers you something, or somebody that does a task for you in work. Like a lot of this is like coded into humanity, but if you continuously think about like, actually this is like, I actually got this idea from this person, or I used this specific thing to do, this is the technique that I use, this is the certain brand of, I don't know, like this is the certain brand of like salt that I use, or like you can find loads of places to give credit. And if you make it a habit of like sharing how you've done something, who you've gotten these things from, who helped you, it like really helps the system overall, I think. And it's something that I try to do a lot, but I don't know, it's still a lot of moon pointing. Yeah, so I think this is like maybe a rule that's a bit too close to look for the helpers. I think they could probably be rolled into the same concept, but I don't know. I have like a rule that I might drop in instead of always look for the helpers. But I don't know. That's the beauty of it. Every 3 months I reevaluate the list. So we'll see whether that sticks in at the end of the month. Okay. Build systems, not habits. Okay. So this, again, is kind of a bit about patterns, in that you don't particularly want to make habits, because habits don't particularly have accountability. They sort of rely purely on willpower. And although like everybody, like whenever I end up in that side of like weird motivational YouTube, they always make it a thing to say like, okay, you want to build habits and do these things every day. And I mean, I'm guilty of that obviously in this list a little bit, but I think it's not sustainable, because like one wrong thing can happen, and it will fall apart, right? You'll have like one bad day, you'll miss a day on something, feel demotivated, and then you either pick yourself up if you're really cool, but if it's something particularly bad, then you won't just pick it back up. And sometimes that's okay to do, but if you really want this thing to continue, whatever it is that you're doing, you make it as easy as possible. And then instead of as easy as possible, you also want to have this element of really hard not to do. Okay, which is kind of like approaching it from the other side. Because although like you can set out gym clothes, or like at the like last thing that you do at night, put out like trainers or whatever it is these people like to do to like promote themselves for running, or like you can leave a glass of water by your bed so that you'll drink it in the morning or during the night. But really that doesn't like, it doesn't really have the built-in accountability sometimes. Like there is no like demonstrable problem with just walking past those trainers, right, one day, or like muting the alarm. So like whenever you can see the opportunity to make something hard not to do, I think that you should always go for it. Even if it's just like a little bit of extra resistance. Like for instance, for this streaming stuff, I know that like in about maybe 2 weeks or so, I know that my motivation for it might drop quite considerably. But if I can get my schedule and what I want to be doing down by then I will be able to schedule it all in advance, a week in advance, and then roll over like that, instead of like skipping one day, or just because I forget to put the notification on or set an alarm or something. If I can have that like little bit of extra resistance where I have to go like cancel something, then that's like a step in the right direction. That's one for mental health, or specifically, or specific example, eating disorders, alcohol addicts, people in any kind of recovery, even physical recovery after injury. Yeah, for sure. Um, Specifically in like recovery as well, like that's like a pretty good example of it, because usually you have like therapists and stuff that come around and help you with that sort of thing, from time to time. And if you don't meet with them, then your situation gets like considerably worse. Um, I would guess anyway. Um, and like you can expect like the BBC to have a news story there for 6 p.m., right? Although I don't watch the BBC News, I assume that they have a 6 o'clock broadcast. And they've always had one for as long as any of us can remember. And that's not just because like one person, it will fail. Like if one person isn't there, then it'll fail. They have like multiple mechanisms in order to make sure that thing gets done. And it's the same with this. You don't want to build habits to do things. You want to make as much accountability around it as possible, so that you're not just letting yourself down. Because like I said before, you can usually, for a lot of things that you're doing, you can usually just like leave it, and it'll be probably fine after a while, like, and it'll just develop a problem. Whereas if you build a system around it, if you have like a crew that needs to join in, or like you have friends that really enjoy a certain activity that you do with them, then you don't want to let them down, right? And it's building up that resistance as much as possible. Now, how you do that with like cleaning your teeth, or I don't know, like eating healthy is kind of like a hard thing. I guess you would like choose to run for a marathon with a friend or something. Like you would have to hack around with it in order to get the intended benefits, or the intended side effects, I guess. Yeah. I guess this next one is kind of similar to spotting patterns, actually, which is this one is know when to break the rules. It's so funny that the we'll go there. Know when to break the rules. This is I think the most divergent rule from the original list, probably. Yeah, it is. I mean, it also is kind of an obvious rule, I guess, that like you see problems with like rules, not just these rules, but other rules that you do in your daily life. And if you have enough context to know why those rules are in place, it should be easy to follow them. But it's you can't always do something, or like do what's right, or do something that's like healthy or worth it. Like sometimes you have to break certain rules in order to progress things further. Like if you're in like a relationship that's become toxic, the rules of the relationship is to like maintain it and try to fix through things. But sometimes you have to break out of that relationship, and that involves breaking the rules of the relationship. Like a relationship, in order to exist, needs to be maintained, right? Or like taken part in. So you have to break the rule of taking part in it in order to fix the problem. Or yeah, like I don't know. The knowing when is the important part of this. It's not just about breaking rules willy-nilly, but knowing that it's appropriate to do so. I guess it's like in a superset of rules in this case, but yeah. Sometimes rules are unjust or unuseful. Not useful. Detrimental. You probably have something for black and white thinking, which is the best friend of toxic habits. What I do, it's not. I don't know whether I have black propensity to black and white thinking. I think that I'm very atomistic with my thinking. I like try to break things down as much as I can. Well, if it's something that is like on some rule, I meant which one? Or like some of these rules are black and white stuff. Yeah, I have like this. I think I'm very atomistic in my thinking. I think that like when I come across a thing that I don't know the answer to, I try to break it down as much as I can, down to like what are all of the likely outcomes from this, and if this happens, then what will be the results? What will need to happen in order to get the results that I want out of things? And although I might not be able to know with certainty that something would happen, like you can generally make good enough guesses most of the time, I think, when you break things down to like their like core exchanges. Especially if you're thinking clear enough for it. It's I think it's something at least that I can do. I'm not sure what other people can do, or even would attempt to like write down how they think a social interaction will go, and imagine it going really badly, and making judgments on whether it will go badly, depending on different things. On black and white thinking, or all or nothing, good if you don't have, you think clear. Yeah. I don't know whether it's like such a weird dichotomy to say that you're either black or white thinking or not, because in lots of ways I do think that I'm quite black and white thinking, but it's sort of like I have like a really diffuse way of thinking. Like as I said, atomistic. Like I can make black and white decisions about really, really small things in situations, like whether somebody will be offended by this one line, or how they might think if I use certain words, or if I tell them about some story in like one context. And obviously I don't know exactly what they're going to say or bring to the conversation at all, but I can make on the fly judgments of those things. I think everybody does it to an extent. But if you can like think through those situations before you have them, because you know that they're probably going to come up, then you want to try to work out what the long-term situation would be from the different ways that you say these things. I think that helps a lot to go through that. But I don't know, it's really hard to do without examples. Most of the examples that are coming to mind are like not things that I particularly want to talk about. So yeah, let's continue. 9. I don't know whether we'll fit everything in. Yeah, we will. Okay. Note down important things. Okay, so this is like a relatively new rule. Essentially, yeah, make sure that when you see something happen, for example, I didn't have time to work out today. Day is ruined. Yeah, I see that. It is kind of like a toxic thing to come across, but it is also sometimes all right to feel like your day is ruined, as like a form of well, I don't want that to happen again, so tomorrow I'll do better. Or how, like looking back on it and seeing like, why didn't I have time for that? And if you truly couldn't have made the time anyway, then there's no point feeling bad about it, because you didn't have the time for it. It's like a impossible task to do. Or if you just forgot about it, that's fine too. You're probably doing more important stuff, you know? Like missing out on a day, a week, a month, a year, it doesn't really matter if you don't make it matter. Because most of those things are like, yeah, your own deal. If it really matters to you, then you want to make it yours, your deal with other people. Like the whole systems approach. Note down important things. Yep, just make notes of things. It's kind of an obvious thing, but also like you forget cool ideas, or you might be like, even in like movies, or like when you see something happen in person, or you are traveling, like making sure that you know how you can get the time back from when you're not like physically back, not like earning back the time, but like knowing that you can find when you left a station, for instance, or like knowing basic information about the important events that have happened throughout the day, or the contents of important things in your day. I think it's like a really useful thing to do. Like I write down every time that a piece of transport that I'm on moves, like not moves in general, but like every time it like leaves the station that I'm in, so that I have a start time for my journey, for each section of my journey. That way I can be really certain of when I can prove myself being in a certain place. I can be like, this is when I was there. I'm sure that we could find CCTV or like whatever. And you can be like, okay, well, I spent this long on these bits of bits of transport, or I was watching this movie at this time. Like, oh, what was that movie's name again from like 3 weeks ago? I can go back and find out that. Or like, when did I binge watch that series? In like I don't know, in 2017. Like I can go find a series right now and work out what I was watching on this day, So if you had like an idea, sometimes, like this ties back a little bit to the credit thing, maybe a little bit, that like if I go back through my journals, I can see like different ideas that I wrote down, and I can see when I did them and see what the context was when I had that idea. So maybe it was that I just like saw something happen on a train, or I just listened to a podcast, or I was in a certain place, or I was with some people, and like I can try to like recreate that context when making the artwork to see whether I can flesh it out a little bit more, or I can reference things or give credit for like where that idea came from, and it helps you like build the story of like your life a little bit, if you have all of this context available. And yeah, that's why I think you should note down everything that's important. Note down as many important things as you can, I think. I always have my journal within arm's reach. It's not really a diary, but more of a log of things that have happened. I guess in a way it's kind of like a bullet journal, but I don't know, it's so far away from like the bullet journal concept, I think that it's kind of redundant to call it a bullet journal at this point. Maybe I'll do something on the journal. I don't know. We'll see. X or 10 deck, whatever you want to call it. Finish what you start. So, kind of obvious what I'm trying to say with this one, but it does have a little bit of nuance. Like, yes, you try to see a project or an idea through to its conclusion, but sometimes you find an idea just doesn't go anywhere and you just want to finish it. And what finishing looks like can vary between what you're doing. Like sometimes you'll find that actually this idea would work better if I rolled it in with another idea. Or this could be applied to like food. Like if you have a pizza, you want to make sure that you finish it before it goes bad, right? like you finish everything that you start. Um, Whether that, even in the case of the pizza, like maybe finishing it would be like giving it to somebody who you're sharing a space with because they're hungry, you know. But finishing it doesn't necessarily mean bringing it to like its ultimate conclusion, because nothing really ever ends. But um, the the act of knowing when something is done, I think, is a really important thing to try to keep going back to, because otherwise things start to pile up. Um, yeah. So you try to finish everything, even ideas. Continuously going back to like see whether you can take this idea, whether it's truly a dead idea or whether there are elements of it that you can reuse in other things. And then as well, that helps to build the story a bit more. And then I've drawn the L backwards, right? And the final one is keep it simple, stupid. Which is, yeah, just try to keep it simple. I think this is like the most important thing of the list. Like, not like some things need to be complicated, but usually you can use shorthand for most things. This is why I have this list. This is why I have this video. Like, this is the this video is antithetical to this final rule, because really, as I said with the first rule, like, this is my set of rules. I didn't really need to share this, but I did. Because I think that it, you know, it probably helps gauge a little bit more context to why I do things and how I approach things and go through ideas. Keep it simple, stupid is sort of, yeah, like you try to find shorthand, shortcuts. You try to make it easily digestible, and make it so that there's not much that can go wrong. You should constantly be trying to like cut things back. Well, not constantly, but like you should have like a purge cycle built into your work. It kind of relates a bit to the finish where you start. You don't want to get too many things on your plate, because like, who really needs to be doing like 10 billion things? Probably no one. It's probably going to be detrimental to things. Maybe you can make it work. Maybe the simplicity is that you can like bulk do these long tasks, and that these things can be like rolled into each other because of like patterns that have been chosen. But thanks for sharing. It's easier to meet you / understand you. The calmness. Yeah, like, this should put into context a little bit better, like the way that I think about things. Yeah, keep it simple, stupid is I think like a US Navy phrase. The KISS principle. I don't know whether my keep it simple, stupid has the same meaning. It's been ages since I've looked up KISS, but that's how I think about it. And it's also one of the reasons why like all of these rules are like really short. I don't want to like explain too much from just this, because it's just something that these are like merely pointing at the subject. Like, I used a phrase earlier, the pointing to the moon, which is like a reference to Zen koans, where I can't remember who, but one of the patriarchs are saying that pointing to the moon is not the moon itself. Like, the words that you use do not have the meaning. Meaning doesn't come from words. It comes from like, it is the meaning is like the core that you're getting at, but the pointing is what you're doing. And like, even if you're pointing, say like I'm pointing at the moon, right? And I go like, oh yeah, there's the moon, like over there is the moon. From your perspective, it might look like I'm pointing at something completely different. Like if I go, there's the moon, it's actually, you might actually be thinking it's this light back here, right? This big orange globe. Like, just because I know what I'm pointing at doesn't mean that you're going to receive the right pointing. Like you're not going to necessarily understand what I'm talking about. So yeah, these rules are only really pointers to things. That's why I don't think that I've shared them ever before online. I don't think I've ever shared them online. I might have shared them like once or twice, but I don't really bring them up much to people because I think that's kind of pointless, because most of the time I'd have to go on like this hour-long talk to like explain out all of the rules, and then even then it's only gonna give you approximation of what I mean, because these are essentially just like phrases to point towards certain concepts in my mind. And some of them aren't even my phrases, they're just me pointing to somebody else's pointing. Okay, and so now that I've gotten the current list out of the way, the only rule that I'm thinking about adding is I'm gonna use this color. I don't know whether this is run out or not, but we'll go for it. It won't fail because of me. So yeah, the last rule that I'm currently thinking about trading one of the current set for is that it won't fail because of me, which is a quote from the Tom Sachs studio, I think. I don't know where he got it, but that's where I heard it, which is essentially a like personal responsibility to it. I've made sure I got my job done, and like if ever I think it's more of like a group rule, so I'm not sure whether it'll make it into Refocus, but making sure that your part of the machine is well oiled. That even if you fall apart, the whole machine won't break. Okay, and I think that's all of Refocus that I can really talk about without like going much more into just repeating myself. So if either of the other two viewers right now want to ask any questions, then you're welcome to. I know that one of you may have only just joined, but yeah. No? Okay, well, anybody who's watching this later, feel free to give a comment if you want. I'll be sure to reply to it. It's been nice hanging out. I'll see you tomorrow for work in progress. I don't know whether I'll continue with this series, but I don't know. It's been quite fun. This is just one art project, so it feels right to have gone through it as being the first one, given that it is like the main driving force at the minute. Okay, it was nice hanging out. Stay hydrated. We would enjoy more of these. Yeah, I think so. I think maybe if it was more, I mean, this one, like, I don't really think I could get through it being not stale. I don't know how I can really make this exciting with it being no longer a static rule set. Like, I could have made like a short film for each of them, you know? But if I were to do that, it would just never get done. Maybe it'll happen at some point when I have like more resources and time, but it's kind of pointless to do it at this stage. I might as well get it out of the way so I'm not thinking about it. Actually, that's one of the parts of this finish where you start, in that if you are truly taking this rule to heart, you want to make sure that everything that you're doing brings it to a point of finishing. So if you leave it off, you're not like starting in the middle of like a confusing part. This particularly is really helpful for me with artworks. Like I never really stop in the middle of doing something. Unless like I try to, if I'm doing something, if I'm doing like a big task, I'll break it into really smaller tasks, and then I'll stop at the end of one of those smaller tasks. I won't just like stop halfway through one thing, because it's pointless leaving it in that state, because there's a good chance that I'll just come back to it and it won't be understandable by me anymore. In the same way that like any of my bigger projects are in a constant state of being done unless I'm working on them, because they they can be published at any time. I'm constantly working on the final version, you know? And as soon as you can get it to that final version, you get to refine it, or you get to enhance it. And I think it's important to try to maintain that level of like doneness, completeness. Because eventually you will get to a point where you're like, okay, yeah, there isn't really much more I can add here. Or this is starting to be unproductive, so you just stop. But you don't have to like do much work to stop it, right? So I think this kind of builds into it too. I think about that quite a bit, like, yeah. Okay. With that little cliff note, I must finish this stream now. And there's no problem to revisit this refocus at another point in the future if the list changes substantially, or if I find a better way of displaying it. Who knows? Okay, well, take care. Brush your hair. See you tomorrow, and stay hydrated. Bye bye.